Hello everyone, I'm Autumn Flame and today we're going to be recapping over my recent Ultimate Insanity Mass Effect challenge where I sought to beat the game using only the default equipment, no powers, no purchases, no upgrades on the equipment. We're going to go over the detailings of key points and things that I thought good and bad and struggles that I had throughout the game. Starting off, our first death was against his Geth Destroyer. I didn't focus him down quite fast enough, and as you can see, he decided to kill me quite quickly. After that, I only had one more death on Eden Prime, which was later when we're trying to defuse the bombs, but that was more when I got distracted and died. Then we continued on, and as we are facing these two assassins, is really what got me for a while. I went from 2 deaths up to 12, totaling 10 deaths here, trying to take these two out without any powers whatsoever, and the Thorian's ability to use immunity a lot. I was incredibly difficult to try and burn them down quick enough when they decided not to try and charge me, which at that point is what was killing me more than anything, with the lack of DPS and lack of health at this stage of the game. I would have, in a normal sense, defeated these two very easily, but as all my weapons were incredibly low damage, as you see, we just had to slowly pick them off one by one, but eventually getting through it and being able to take them out. Taking enemies down by melee attacks was a very big part of it, being able to take them down and keep them stunned in order to get that little bit of extra DPS onto them. After that, we recruited Garrus quite easily, no really issues there. Went and recruited Rex, no problems there, as we just got to go talk to CSEC. And then on to the Fist Bar fight. This actually wasn't too challenging, it just took quite a while to take down all these enemies as there was quite a lot of them. We just had to slowly and methodically work our way through, and we didn't suffer any deaths here at all. Ideally we would have been able to do this a little bit faster, but as we go, Ashley and Rex tended to be more of a hindrance more often than not, dying quite quickly, and without immunity, or not immunity I should say, whichever one it is to bring them back to life, it was quite difficult to progress at times. Taking down Fist actually was a lot less painful than I thought, as all the turrets and Fist were concentrated on me. Ashley was able to focus the turrets down and take them down quite easily, which was quite okay for me since they would grind me down very fast. Overall, I was a bit more worried about the next stage of the fight, as we have to get through all of another wave of combat inside the bar in order to rescue Tali. I was incredibly worried, but decided that I'm not going to try and do it the hard way and focus upon doing things the easy way, which by just running past them all, which we'll see in a couple of seconds. So you see here we're getting ready to just run past everyone since there are way too many enemies, and there's no way that we'd be able to continue along with that timer and get through them within 4 minutes. It would just be physically impossible, so we just ran past everyone. Bit of a cheat, but was the only way I foresaw this actually happening. Did enter into the Tali fight with a little bit less health than I would have liked, but luckily Tali helps us out in the fight and the enemies aren't that much of a danger, so we're never really at that much of a threat.
Just set me up. Just set me up.
Here, leaving the Citadel, we ended up on Therum, bypassing everything quite easily. We used the glitch to get our Mako through here, not really facing any deaths because I did not want to fight the Geth up ahead all on foot, which would have been an absolute nightmare, so we took advantage of whatever items we can to do it. It is a little bit tricky driving the Mako through here sometimes, just with all the rocks in the way, but the frustration is well worth it in order to continue. The opening stage into the mine where Liara is will cause a few bits of trouble. The Geth caused a few. Then I reached this point with these drones who were severely taking me down, and at one point I did consider that I would no longer be able to continue, as I was unable to take them out until I discovered if I hid back behind this pillar I could take these drones out without any real issue and they could not fire back at me. So in totaling about 10 deaths, I managed to be able to get through this section and then continue on without too much trouble after that. At least until after Liara's recruitment. After talking to Liara, we had to fight through these Geth here. This caused significant trouble for me for a little while, as there was a lot of Geth and not much cover. I did consider this might have been another point where I would have been stuck and not able to continue, but through a lot of trial and error and a lot of RNG, we're able to focus the enemies down enough that we're able to get through this section alive and manipulate the AI to a minimal extent that they would come up in the least rush way possible so we could actually get through this. I found that swapping weapons quite frequently was needed, as the shotgun and sniper rifle would provide enough of a boost to knock enemies down in order to get through. These Geth snipers, while fearsome in some playthroughs, were actually the least fearsome enemy for me and the ones I liked facing the most, as they were the most easily dodged and the weakest of all the Geth. The Krogan Battlemaster fight here was the key point where I believe the run to be truly over. The 5 Geth that come with him, were not that easily dealt with at first, and after quite a few deaths I had to start changing my tactics and work on new ways. So you can see here I started to have to use abilities, which I just tried to use the base abilities that I was given when I first started, since I was unable to get through the fight at all. I started hiding behind this little alcove over here in hopes that I could gain that extra little bit of cover from the Krogan Battlemaster and all the Geth, but with continual fights it didn't work, and then over time I had to swap Rex and Ashley for Caden and Tali in order to gain some better crowd control, which I used the sabotage ability to stop the Geth sniper and the rocket trooper from killing my team, as they were the 2 biggest threats as soon as the fight started, and then try and take out the other 2 Geth shock troopers and then the Krogan Battlemaster afterwards. Over time I had to increasingly add more skills until we had the equivalent of level 6, which the Krogan Battlemaster could only be knocked down and stunned with a 2nd level throw, in addition to my neural shock, which was one of the few things that was able to keep him stunned as well and do some long-term poison damage. And immunity definitely came in handy, in addition to being able to resurrect the enemies as my allies as well. Without Unity, there is no way I don't think I could have continued this fight in addition. At this point was the no power run stopped. I tried to maintain a 50% level 2 points system, so hitting level 10 I would have about 5 points or maybe 6 in there, and try and play with that as long as I could until I hit a point where I could no longer continue and had to invest a few more skill points in order to beat the current section. And coming up will be the Battlemaster fight on my first successful completion. Alright. Alright.
This should slow them down.
So let's try hacking him now.
This should slow them down.
So let's try hacking him now. Okay. Not looking too bad here. Okay. Not looking too bad here. As you can see, we reached 90 deaths, so he's died about 80 times trying to get to this point. Wait for those shields.
I've lost shield.
I'm on it.
I've lost shield.
Countermeasure deployed.
I'm on it.
Let's try throwing him. Alright. I'll wait for him to get back up. Are we gonna do it this time?
Target acquired.
They're in my sights.
Okay, but here with a neural shock. Do it.
Locked and loaded.
Oh, finally. Neural shock.
Locked and loaded.
Oh, finally. Continuing on to Novaria, we faced a little bit of trouble trying to take out the guards on Lorik King's quest, but it really was more up to RNG than anything that we failed and died a few times. But the enemies really weren't that much of an issue. Bringing in additional throw and crowd control options was the key to succeeding here. I don't think I could have really done it without them. At this point it became a minimal power run. As I said, I tried to maintain the minimum amount of power as possible, but there were definitely key choke points where I had to increase the amount of powers just to get through. The garage fight, I had to definitely run in and use the vehicle here because there was no way I was going to pass this fight without it. I did not even want to attempt to do it without this. The fight, as soon as we reached the labs, was incredibly difficult at first. The destroyer was ruining my team. Once that was down, the 3 Krogan provided significant difficulty, but slowly and picking them off one at a time, I managed to be able to take all 3 out. In the labs, trying to take the power relay wasn't too bad at all. I suffered a death, but they were pretty easy to pick off, all being very separate, and I didn't really face that much of an issue. The Arachnai on the communications relay were very difficult to get around with sheer numbers, and I had to manage to get past them with neural shock and using immunity to constantly keep my character alive. It took me quite a few tries to get through there, but eventually we managed to get there. This fight was a lot easier than expected. A well-placed throw threw a lot of the enemies over the wall and into an area where they couldn't attack me anymore, which made this a lot more of a breeze than I thought it was going to be, and helped me an insane amount. The Benezia Fight was incredibly long and difficult, leading to quite a few deaths, mostly due to RNG. The third wave before the final Benezia with the Geth snipers was probably the easiest round to deal with. The Benezia fight itself was incredibly difficult, needing to kite her around the map consistently again and again and again, using whatever stuns I could, using immunity and using a neural shock when I could, and reviving whenever I had to. Without these powers, there is no way I would have made it through, but eventually you managed to get to the end and take her down after quite a few deaths. But at no point was I really worried that we would end up locked here. Running through the labs here was a very dangerous prospect, a couple of deaths, but we just had to pop immunity and run through and pray that would make it in time without dying. Normally I would maybe even try and fight a few of them, but there was just no chance. We had to rely on pure luck. Without immunity, there is no way I would have made it through this section. And Pharos, in this tower was an incredibly difficult point, especially with the drones that appear. They are very fast and tanky and really upset their balance of the combat, where I normally would drag back a few at a time, but with quite a few deaths we managed to change tactics enough that we could get through. The Krogan Commander fight was a little bit difficult, cost me a couple of lives, but it was more down to RNG and whether or not I could get good stun patterns on him rather than anything else. The rest of the Pharos was pretty easy to do with no notable deaths. I kept the Mako here as long as I could to try and get through this section, unfortunately having to kill all civilians as I had no grenade upgrades. The Thorian Fight was long and brutal, requiring some upgrades or more on my skills to be able to get through it. The Thorian creepers being the largest part of it, why they were bad, just because of their high health pool and my low damage. But melee attacks to keep them stunned and on the ground were definitely the order of the day. Shiala really wasn't that much of an issue, but through immunity I was able to get through. Talked to Sovereign, he didn't really have much to say other than his normal nonsense. Vermeer was not that bad realistically. I managed to get through the quest. Luckily Sarin bugged out here, sat in that corner and did not move for the rest of the fight, and I was able to take him down relatively easy, which was a prayer for me since my damage output is pathetic and I was unable to do much when he's flying around and lacked the Paragon at the time to be able to talk him out of it. Punched out Udina. On Ilos, things actually were pretty easy. Hacked two of these armatures to help me with this fight, and the two armatures took out the enemies for the rest of it. I didn't feel the need to get all four, since two seemed to get the job done pretty easily. Otherwise this would have nearly been an impossible fight. Talked to Vigil. Landed back down on the Citadel, and we faced a lot of trouble with infinitely spawning Geth Juggernauts, and the Krogan were incredibly strong, which caused me a lot of trouble to the point where I had to replay many times. Ended up killing Sarin. Managed to do the option to have him to commit suicide to avoid one of those battles, which was incredibly handy for me. The previous points of the battle I had to run through most of the Citadel in order to get to the end, since there were too many Krogan, too many heavy Geth. It was just impossible to get through in any reasonable time frame, especially Krogan, and their regeneration being the key point where I physically could not progress anymore into the combat. So I just avoided it all. And then leading into our Sarin fight, this was when the pain really started up, as the fight took well over an hour to complete just with my abysmal damage, running consistent damage on the enemies. On him specifically, I rarely even saw the damage meter look like it made any progress, and I worried for a minute if I actually was doing damage at all, since he has quite high health pool. So here you'll see small segments of the fight in order to see how bad it was fighting him and how long it took me just to take down one bar of his shields. Using my abilities was quite difficult, as he was resistant to quite a lot of them and he could one-shot my party quite easily. I just had to keep spamming abilities and attacking him and moving and attacking, never stopping, for when he hit me with the rocket attacks would be an easy wipe for the party. Luckily I didn't die at all during this fight, because this would have been an absolute nightmare to replay multiple times, especially taking an hour, leading up to the finale of us killing him. And with that, and 175 deaths later, we managed to get through Mass Effect on Insanity with default equipment, originally trying to go minimal power, no powers into minimal into whatever I needed to finish the game. But with the default weapons and equipment, I found the earliest part was the hardest was the lack of DPS, and then the lack of health at later stages. The health really did mitigate a little bit with abilities, but the lack of damage was definitely the key focus of the difficulty of this run. Normally my soldier with maxed out abilities, Spectre X weapons, can burn through all these things without even worrying about dying, and is essentially immortal with the right build into the armor. But overall it was a fun challenge to be able to take out the entire game in from the perceivably hardest way possible, and seeing what challenges would have faced. I think Sarin was definitely the worst challenge, even though the Krogan Battlemaster on Thorian took me quite a few tries, having to adapt my strategy in order to be able to beat him. I could have reduced the death count by probably nearly down to under 100, but if I ever ran this again, which I don't think I will because of the pain of it, but definitely Sarin with his incredibly large health pool was the key point of trying to beat this, and the most frustrating, and the long, taking about an hour to complete with half an hour for each of the phases. It's not something I would really recommend anyone doing on a regular basis. If you'd like to do it for the challenge, you're most welcome. If you can beat my record of 175 kills, I would most welcome you to try and do so. I know I could probably get it down to under 100, or if I ran it consecutively, down to only a few kills, but it's just not something that I feel is worth it. I don't really feel doing Mass Effect 2 and 3 on Insanity would achieve the same results, as the thermal clips changed the nature of the combat to that where I don't think we'd ever even complete it, especially in something as early as Garrus's recruitment mission being heavily time based and gear dependent. I think we would end up failing that sooner than we would think, so that'll just be something that will sit on the wish list unless somebody else would like to do it. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in and having a look at this video. If it inspires you to try and run a Insanity challenge or do something else difficult on your own, I would always be welcome to hear about your stories of playing Mass Effect 1, 2, 3 or Andromeda on Insanity, things that you think I could have done differently to perhaps make things harder or easier myself. And please do not say a melee only challenge, since that is physically impossible. We'll just stick with that then. Everyone have yourself a good day, and I shall see you all soon.